I attended a webinar this morning about natural swimming pools, and it kind of rattled some thoughts about the pond. A lot of people had questions that I don't think were quite answered on the webinar, and I thought I'd kind of go through them a little bit here because it reminded me of how grateful I am that we chose to do this kind of water feature this way. The natural swimming pool, generally speaking, is just a swimming pool. And because it's a swimming pool, it has all the same structural features as a swimming pool. It goes through the same permitting process. It has all the same electrical, all the same plumbing, and a lot of the same filtration. The only difference in the filtration is that one has chemicals, one doesn't. I mean, there are other differences, but that's the main difference. And some of the people on the webinar were asking about, what if we want it to look different? What if we want it to have different plants, different gravels or sands, and different rocks? And there's a lot of constraints when you do it the traditional structured way rather than doing like a rubber liner type of structure. The main thing that people were worried about is the cost. They kept saying things like, well, what's the cheap man's way of doing this? And there is no cheap man's way of doing the natural swimming pool because it's just a swimming pool. And one of the reasons people like the natural swimming pool is because there's no chemicals. The other reason is because it's really clean. You don't have what you have in something like this, where you've got little bits of algae here and there. Some people don't like that or don't want to see it, don't want to feel it when they swim or whatever. And so they want to see something that looks like the traditional chlorinated swimming pool without the chlorine. And that wasn't really my problem. I'm not really bothered by the plants and moss and algae and whatever. Because that's just how I grew up. I grew up swimming in ditches and rivers, and so it doesn't bother me very much. But some people don't like it. And we haven't swam in this for about 3 months because the water's cold and the water's still really low because it hasn't rained. But this moss here, for example, is algae, string algae. It only developed once we stopped swimming, and then it'll go away once the plants start growing back, because the plants have been dying back for a while now, a month and a half probably. And they'll come back really strong in the spring, and then all of this algae will go away, and a lot of that will go away. And there's really not much maintenance. I haven't done any maintenance on this for probably 2 months. Every once in a while, I'll come around and like pick up some of the leaves that you see, but there's a skimmer that does most of that work. So I don't really do much maintenance on it. And so I think it's interesting how people, generally speaking, want the traditional look. They don't want something that looks actually natural. They want it to feel natural without looking natural. And then something like this looks natural, and people don't necessarily like that until they realize, oh, this is like 10 to 20%, maybe 30% of the cost of the traditional pools, and 10 to 30% the cost of the natural swimming pools, which is just the same structure with a different filtration system. And so it's been interesting to watch that, and I'm grateful to have stumbled upon some of the resources that I did, like David Pagan Butler and his design. That's where most of this came from. And then just figuring out how to make it work for what I wanted, and it's worked out really well. It's still a very young pond, and so a lot of this plants will grow in, algae will continue to decrease, and it'll just keep getting healthier and healthier. But I'm glad that I did not go the route of a giant structured traditional pool with a complicated pump, electrical, plumbing, big electrical bills. This runs on 100 watts. So, I have basically a light bulb that's turned on all the time to run this thing. So electricity is minimal and the water movement is plenty. I'm probably going to get a smaller pump for the winter because we don't need to be moving this much water when the pond is sleeping in the winter. But I think there's a lot of advantages to it. And people that don't like the look will talk about how it's maintenance intensive and they're constantly like pulling out the algae and stuff like that, which I guess you can do if it really bothers you that much. But if you're that concerned about the look of it, then yeah, I would definitely just get a traditional swimming pool. At the price of $100,000 to $180,000, you can get a really clean looking traditional swimming pool, and then you can have whatever kind of filtration you want, whether you want chemicals or not. But this works really well for us. I'm really happy with it. It'll be fun to see it come back to life in the spring.